Ladies and gentlemen, imagine the vast, empty silence of a desert where the only sound is the wind, and something else: a broken bar watching. One man drove through Nevada's Black Rock, only to vanish. Days later, his car was found, the driver's seat covered in claw marks. A hiker in Arizona swore a pale figure followed him every night. Locals say it's the Dust Walker, a spirit that never stops hunting. And in Egypt's White Desert, explorers found tents ripped apart and no signs of struggle, no footprints, just silence, a broken bar and bones. Be careful out there. Some deserts don't forget. Deserts hold chilling mysteries. From Nevada to Egypt, real-life disappearances and eerie encounters hint that deserts may conceal supernatural forces or ancient terrors. The desert is often thought of as a barren and lifeless place, but in truth, it is full of secrets. Its silence is not a sign of peace, but avoid waiting to be filled by the cries of the unknown. Unlike forests or mountains, where life bustles in cover and shadow, the desert's openness is deceptive. What seems empty is, in fact, a stage for the most unsettling and unexplained phenomena humanity has ever faced. In the deserts of the American Southwest, countless stories circulate about travelers who vanish without a trace. One of the most well-known is the case of a man who drove across Nevada's Black Rock Desert. He left behind a GPS signal that ended suddenly in the middle of a dry lake bed. When searchers found his car days later, the inside was perfectly intact except for the deep, unnatural claw marks on the driver's seat. There were no footprints, no struggle, no signs of what had taken him. Experts offered wildlife as an explanation, but the marks didn't match any known animal. Locals whispered about the shades, entities they believe patrol the vast emptiness, watching for those who travel alone. Further south, in the Sonoran Desert, tales persist of strange lights that dance across the night sky. These aren't the usual mirages caused by heat waves. Witnesses have described pulsing orbs that hover low, moving with an intelligence that seems to mimic or even mock those who watch. Hikers have followed the lights out of curiosity, only to find themselves hopelessly lost, their sense of direction erased, their footprints disappearing behind them. One man who survived an encounter said he felt like he was being herded slowly, deliberately toward something. He eventually found his way back, dehydrated and delusional, but when questioned, he kept muttering a single phrase: "It watches in the heat." Arizona's deserts, too, are home to ghostly legends. Among the most chilling is the story of the Dust Walker, a tall, pale figure said to roam the deserts under the moonlight. Eyewitnesses claim it doesn't leave tracks but moves effortlessly through sand and stone, always keeping just out of reach. People have reported the feeling of being watched while camping, of hearing footsteps crunching nearby though no one was there. One hiker recounted waking in the middle of the night to find the outline of a handprint pressed against his tent on the inside. He had zipped himself in before sleeping and found no tears or openings. Terrified, he ran without looking back. The next morning, his tent was gone, but the ground where it had been showed no signs of dragging, no struggle, no footprints, only a single set of tracks, animal-like, yet human in size. It led off into the desert. Across the Atlantic, Egypt's White Desert holds mysteries that have baffled explorers for decades. Known for its strange, chalk-like rock formations, it seems like a place sculpted by dreams. But dreams often slide into nightmares. Several expeditions have ventured deep into the region, only to return with chilling accounts or never return at all. One group of European travelers reported hearing a low humming sound that grew louder each night. Eventually, their tents were found slashed open from the inside. The team had vanished. When local Bedouins were asked, they refused to enter the area, claiming it was haunted by jinn, spirits of fire and air that thrive in isolated, desolate places. One tracker said the land itself remembers everyone who walks upon it, and that the rocks whisper in the wind, retelling the final moments of the lost. Further stories come from military personnel stationed in desert regions. Soldiers have spoken of encountering abandoned villages with fires still burning, yet no signs of life. Others report the sudden appearance of stone structures that vanish hours later. Surveillance equipment malfunctions in these areas, compasses spin wildly, and trained dogs refuse to proceed. In one incident, a night patrol reported hearing a woman's voice calling for help just beyond the dunes. When they followed, They found nothing. The voice continued, calling each man by name. They returned shaken, unable to explain how it knew them. Ancient petroglyphs found in desert caves tell their own story. While many show animals or hunting scenes, some depict twisted, humanoid figures with elongated limbs and eyes too large for their faces. These carvings are often found in areas where modern-day reports of strange figures occur. Archaeologists suggest these may have been shamanic visions or warnings, but what if they were records? What if, thousands of years ago, our ancestors saw the same things we now fear in silence? Not all horror in the desert is supernatural. Some believe the vast spaces are ideal hiding grounds for secret experiments, lost civilizations, or even portals. Conspiracy theories swirl around places like Area 51, where UFO sightings and strange disappearances converge. While some of those tales can be dismissed, the consistency of the reports is hard to ignore. Independent travelers, far from any influence or media hype, report eerily similar experiences, a feeling of being watched, machinery going haywire, time itself seeming to distort. Then there are the sounds. In various desert locations, people have reported hearing music with no source, drums beating rhythmically beneath the sand, or a voice whispering directly into their ear. Often, these experiences are accompanied by nausea, headaches, or the sensation of being pulled either physically or mentally towards something unseen. Scientists attribute this to infrasound or the psychological effects of isolation, but those who have felt it describe it as something far deeper and darker. Like the land itself is alive and aware. The silence of the desert is deceptive. It feels total, absolute, but in that silence, other things live, things that have adapted not just to survive the harsh environment, but to thrive in its loneliness, its emptiness. Whether spirits, cryptids, or entities born of human fear and forgotten rituals, the desert seems to be a magnet for the inexplicable. This is the land where light plays tricks, where time stutters, and where distance lies. What looks like safety can become danger in moments. What seems like a mirage can reach out and touch you. Legends like the Dust Walker and Eerie eyewitnesses and local lore suggest that something unseen may stalk the sands, blurring the line between myth and reality. In the sweeping silence of the desert, where life clings to harsh winds and searing heat, the space between what is real and what is imagined becomes porous. In that in-between, stories take root, passed from one campfire to the next, spoken in whispers by those who have seen things they cannot explain. The Dust Walker is one such legend, a figure that lives in the minds of those who have crossed paths with Ida or claim to. Described as a tall, thin, pale humanoid with unnaturally long limbs and a gait that disturbs the sand without leaving prints, the Dust Walker is believed to inhabit the vast deserts of the American Southwest. Some say it travels with the wind. Others claim it follows specific individuals, drawn by isolation or fear. No two sightings are exactly the same, but certain details persist. Its presence is always accompanied by a drop in temperature, an overwhelming feeling of being watched, and the sudden silence of nature, as if even the insects and birds recognize it as something wrong. The legend has existed among Native American tribes for generations, though each culture calls it something different. Some believe it is a guardian spirit, misunderstood and feared by those who don't know its purpose. Others say it is a cursed soul, forever doomed to walk the sands in search of redemption or revenge. In Navajo stories, beings that walk between dimensions skinwalkers are spoken of with similar caution, but locals in small desert towns have given this entity its own name, the Dust Walker, for it seems to emerge only when the air is thick with sand and the horizon blurred by heat. One of the most well-known modern encounters took place in the late 1990s, when a group of college students decided to hike a remote trail in the Mojave Desert. They were experienced campers, equipped with maps, compasses, and satellite phones. On the second night, they reported strange sounds outside their tents, soft, rhythmic dragging noises, like something being pulled across gravel. When they unzipped the tent flaps, there was nothing there. But in the distance, a silhouette stood on the ridge, tall and motionless. One of the students, a photography major, attempted to capture it on film. The camera malfunctioned. The next morning, all four of them found their backpacks rearranged in a perfect circle outside the tent, and none of them remembered moving them. 2 dropped out of the trip and returned early. The other 2 stayed another night. They were never found. Only their tent was discovered, collapsed but untouched, with a single long track etched in the sand leading away from it like something had slithered or floated just above the surface. Local law enforcement wrote it off as dehydration, possible hallucination, or even foul play. But nearby residents weren't surprised. The desert has eyes, one rancher said, and sometimes it wants you to know it's looking. Another incident happened to a solo traveler named Lydia, who was hiking a lesser-known desert trail near Joshua Tree. According to her online journal, she began to feel as though some Enia or something was pacing her from a distance. At first, she chalked it up to paranoia. Then she began noticing strange patterns in the sand, not footprints, but lines, like something dragged along behind a persona or like something with no feet at all. On the 3rd night, she woke to the sound of her name being called, not shouted, whispered. When she unzipped her tent, nothing was there. But several yards away, just barely visible in the moonlight, was a tall shape that seemed to dissolve into the blowing sand when she looked directly at it. She packed up and left before sunrise. Her final journal entry reads, "It walks behind the wind." The dust walker has become something of an urban legend in desert-adjacent towns. Truckers speak of it on CB radios, describing brief glimpses of something walking against the direction of the wind, unaffected by gusts that would knock a man off his feet. They talk of headlights catching something too tall, too thin, crossing the road in a way that isn't human. Search and rescue workers whisper about cases where they find tracks leading out into nowhere, only to abruptly stop as if the person vanished mid-step. Radio operators occasionally pick up strange frequencies out in the desert, garbled messages in languages no one recognizes, sometimes layered with a low hum or a distant, echoing voice. Those who chase the source never find it. Skeptics argue the legend is a psychological response to the isolation and sensory deprivation of the desert environment. Long, monotonous landscapes can play tricks on the mind. Shadows stretch unnaturally in the heat, and the silence can amplify internal fears. Some scientists suggest that exposure to extreme heat, dehydration, and magnetic anomalies in desert rocks can create hallucinations and disorientation. But the people who've experienced the dust walker insist that what they saw or felt was not a trick of the mind. What makes this legend particularly unsettling is the way it seems to adapt to modern times. Unlike older folklore figures, the dust walker isn't bound to ancient language or outdated behavior. It shows up in dash cam footage that mysteriously corrupts, on trail cameras where frames go black just as a tall figure steps into view, in voice memos found on lost hikers' phones that contain nothing but heavy breathing and static. Technology doesn't clarify the legend, it complicates it. If anything, the more we try to capture it, the more it seems to slip away, as though aware of being observed. There are even reports from drone operators who've flown over remote areas and caught glimpses of movement that disappears before the drone can refocus. Some frames, when paused, show something indistinct in the shadow of a canyon or among the rocks, a humanoid blur that vanishes in the next second. These aren't clear enough to be definitive, but they're disturbing enough to leave an impression. Experts dismiss them as glitches or compression artifacts, but those who believe in the dust walker say it chooses what we can see. In art and culture, the dust walker has started appearing more frequently in short horror films, digital paintings, and even indie games. These depictions often emphasize its faceless nature, the unnatural proportions, the long arms that seem to reach but never touch. It's often portrayed as a creature not of flesh but of sand and shadow, like the desert itself giving shape to something that has always been there. Yet, despite this rising popularity, those who've experienced it in person say these portrayals fall short. The real thing, they say, doesn't feel like a monster. It feels like something older than fear, something that knows you, and waits.